Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, or perhaps even good evening, wherever you're tuning in from today. Thanks for joining us in the latest Boutique Hotel News webinar in partnership with Agilysys. And today we're going to be talking about empowering staff with technology to deliver exceptional guest experiences. So my name's Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of hospitality here at Boutique Hotel News, and we're a trade publication covering the global boutique, lifestyle and luxury hotel industry. A little more about Agilysys, which is an integrated software platform that allows businesses to maximize the return on experience. And we have a short video to play for you today, which should give some further insight. Further details about Agilysys have been popped into the chat if you would like to learn more, or you can just tune in to Matthew's introduction. So let's meet our panelists, and I'm going to kick off with Matthew first. So over to you.
Thank you, Eloise. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. Yes, so a bit of my background. I've been involved in hospitality since around 94. First worked for luxury hotels in the Middle East before moving back to the UK to the hotel market. And then around 96, 97, took a role with Micros Fidelio. And around 2011, probably 14 or so years later, took a role with Agilysys, and actually since 2010, 2011, I've been associated with the Agilysys solutions since then. My role within the organization is covering sales across the UK, Ireland, Europe, Middle East, Africa, far too many countries. Obviously, we have to be strategic in how we target particular areas, but really looking forward to spending time with everyone today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. Tara, welcome to the webinar. Over to you.
Thanks, Eloise. Yes, my name is Tara Robinson. I'm Sales and Marketing Director for Eden Hotel Collection. I've been with the company actually for nearly 19 years now, and had about 6 or 7 different roles within the company. Got the hospitality bug, love being in that hospitality arena. So really excited to be speaking and to be on this panel today. Thank you. Thank
you, Tara. And Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Eloise. I'm Laura Sharp, the Director of Operations for Ferndale Hotels, which I've been with for 16 years. We've got 8 boutique hotels, independent hotels in London, of which I've worked in 6 of them. But most recent, about 2 years ago, I moved into operations. We've also got 3 hotels in New York, the newest of which, the Warren Street Hotel, opened 3 weeks ago. So we are high-end 5-star hotels, but also very personal, and it's that kind of matching that technology with the guest expectation of being the personal service, and also being hotels that have been around for a long time, that legacy tech that we've also got across all the properties versus the new ones. So I think it'll be an interesting discussion today.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. And I'll flag here that all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers have been popped into the chat. I would encourage you all to connect to carry on the conversation long after today's webinar has finished. Very quick overview of how this webinar is going to run. We'll spend around 45 minutes in conversation with our speakers today, followed by the time at the end to take any questions from our audience. So please submit any questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens, and I will get round to asking those as and when appropriate. And a gentle reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and that recording will be sent to everybody that has registered within a couple of days' time. Now, before we dive into our main conversation, I always like to highlight some context slides. All of these stories on your screens have been published on BHN, and they all relate in some way to today's conversation. On your left-hand side, the Agilysys survey, which shows how the cost of living is impacting on UK travellers. We're going to share some of the key findings from the report and also what this might tell us about travel in 2024. The two other headlines on your screens show some key themes that have been discussed at hotel conferences recently. In the middle, we've got the Global Revenue Forum, and Amazon's Greg Land is highlighted as saying 94% of travel and hospitality executives say digital transformation is very or somewhat important for the overall strategy and success of their business. 81% have therefore increased their budgets for digital transformation. And on your far side here, which is the Hotel Leadership Conference, Leanne Walters-Hawke from PwC is quoted as saying, treat the employee experience like the customer experience. Use employee data like you would your customer data. On the next slide, I want to highlight the sort of top right-hand headline here about how colleges are using AI to prepare hospitality workers of the future. This is an article or a Q&A with Professor Rachel J.C. Few from the University of Florida. And in this article, she says some examples of how students are receiving more hands-on learning with AI and how it is able to mimic particular scenarios such as checking into a hotel reception or food management, and it gives those students real-time but risk-free learning examples and how they can bring that into hospitality. And this article ends with her prediction that AI solutions will become integral to every aspect of maximizing cash flow in the future. So I hope that's got us all geared up and ready to have a good old chinwag today. And I want to kick off with a question to Matthew. I highlighted just a moment ago about the survey that Agilysys ran, but could you please provide us with an overview of those key findings from the study, Matthew?
Sure, Eloise. I'll certainly do that. I mean, I think, these findings are fairly compelling and demonstrates very simply, I think, for hoteliers that standing still is not an option in what I guess for us all here, having worked in hospitality for a long, long time, it's actually a really tough market to work in. It takes a certain kind of individual, I think, to spend many years in this industry. So we're very familiar with that. But yeah, look, let me just give you some highlights. I mean, we found that 85% of UK travellers have adjusted their travel plans in the last 12 months as a result of the cost of living crisis. In addition, it's estimated that improving guest retention by as little as 5% can increase profits by up to 25%. But only 27% of travellers rebooked a hotel or rebooked the same hotel last year. When it comes to what sort of personalised experiences, 31% said staff giving a personalised recommendation on what they should do during their stay, and 29% said restaurant staff remembering their food and drink preferences. Another 59% of potential customers said they would be less likely to book a hotel if they read a bad review. Again, I think underscoring the significance of maintaining that positive online reputation. You know, look, these findings suggest that UK consumers have been undoubtedly squeezed during the last year. It's resulted in fewer bookings for hotels. Return guests are a core source of revenue for many hotels, but as household leisure budgets have reduced, it's getting harder to entice those same guests to return. You know, recurring revenues or returning guests are the bedrock for hotels and businesses in general, right? So this report attempts to get under the hood of what hotels can do in response to this. And one of the most effective strategies is to tap into this return on experience ethos. With consumers tightening their purse strings, hotels really need to up their game and consider more thoughtful approaches that demonstrates true hospitality. Right now, many UK consumers will expect more bang for their buck. I think that's a given. But this means creating those personalised, tailored stays which really impress upon the guest and meet rising guest expectations. Does that help at all, Louise, set the scene?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I'd really like to, using those findings, and you've sort of alluded to it just then, Matthew, about the expectation for more tailored, personalized experience. But what do those findings suggest about travel trends in 24? I mean, what does that look like to you, Matthew? And then we'll open it up to Laura and Tara.
I think as we move into 2024, it's going to just be a hard graft. I think there's a lot of competition amongst the hotel base to grab their customers. I think those guests, those customers really have to evaluate where they're going to spend their money this year. I speak personally in terms of how, you know, our family needs and desires for holidaying this year will change. And I think I absolutely am no different to millions of others across the UK. So I think, you know, we just have to be very careful in ensuring that these families, individuals, couples, business travelers alike can be catered for in a way that's just different and special and really just reaches out in a way that excites them. I think it's that it's just the special touch. And I think we touched on earlier, perhaps before we started this, people just want to be treated in a different way. And if customers are going to do that, sorry, if hotels are going to be doing that, then that's the hotel that they're going to go and stay at, not the other 10,000 hotels in the UK. And you just need to have that slight element of individuality as a hotelier to warrant that to happen. Let's
look at booking trends, or let's explore booking and travel trends more openly. Tara, you're next on my screen, so I'm going to come to you next. But what are you seeing across the hotel portfolio?
I think in general that we have 5 independent properties, and they range. They're all provincial. So we've got one in Devon on Dartmoor. I'm actually at our hotel, the Greenway in Cheltenham today. We've got one in Stratford upon Avon, Leamington Spa and Worcestershire. And what we find is we really need to drive interest into those destinations as well as interest into our hotels. So it's not always about becoming that sole destination. What we're seeing is that people want to explore that very local doorstep area of the hotel. So it can be whether it's food led, whether it's informational led about special walks that you can do in and around the hotels. You know, that's all adding to their experience, and that adds to, they have a great expectation when they come to us, and we're now working very much harder to get a smaller return in terms of our customer base and our guests. And I think offering that extra experience that's not just focused in on the hotel is something that we were looking towards this year, in fact.
Thanks, Tara. And Laura, what are you observing?
Well, we have 8 hotels in London, and they're all quite close to each other. There's 5 in the West End, and then 3 townhouse hotels that are out in South Kensington and Knightsbridge and Marylebone. So all of our hotels are all facing this similar challenge because of locality. There's so many other options for hotels in London, particularly with the amount of hotels that have opened at the 5-star level. And guests are a lot more aware and a lot more informed about what they want. We have seen a bit of a resurgence of people using travel agents locally. Our domestic market has gone up because they want people who are going to be able to talk to them about their own personal experience and be able to relate that back to what they are wanting out of their stay. They're much pickier about where they're choosing to stay and wanting to understand what this personal service that we are able to give them. We're very lucky that the majority of our guests are return. It's over 50% for us and always has been, but within the group. But I think we have to work on that a lot more because people are wanting a lot more out of their stays. Or if they're using us for the restaurant or for coming in to use us for events, a similar type of thing, it's got to be very into what they are looking for as a special bespoke and wanting, even at the kind of 5-star end, they want value. They want to see that we're going to add to their stay in some way, not necessarily giving lots of discounts or free things, but they want to come away feeling that they've got value for that experience. And it is an experience. It's not just, I need to stay somewhere. I am actually going to get an experience out of this. And we're doing a lot more experiential, like where you come away thinking that it's not just an overnight stay. We're including a lot more into that, which we definitely feel that we have to up our game when it comes to that.
It certainly speaks to more elevated offerings, and especially if you look at the 4 walls of your home, if that is of a particular, let's just say, I'm going to use tech as an example. If your home is at a certain level, then your hotel experience needs to be above that. So if you've got things like Amazon, you've got your Alexa, or you've got your Netflix or your Prime, I think it's fair to say that those elevated offerings, hoteliers need to go above and beyond.
It needs to be seamless, and I think that if you can do whatever you can do at home, they want to be able to walk into their hotel room and not need a manual on how it all works. They want it to be as seamless in the room as it is at home, and if it isn't, then that if they are getting less, and it does need to be very intuitive. There is no point giving anybody something that they are going to have to work through and work at. So it's, yeah, definitely. It has to be better than they've got at home, otherwise we're in trouble.
Tara, I'd like to come back to you very briefly, because you mentioned that your guests are now not just looking within the 4 walls of the hotel, they're looking to be immersed within that local community. So how are you adapting your sales and marketing strategy then to attract not just existing customers, but new ones as well?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. As Laura said, it's about the experience and how we start that. But actually, what's a really interesting thing to do is to say to yourself, what do you want your guests to be saying about you when they leave? So you start at that end rather than right at the beginning of the guest journey, and then you realise that actually the things that people are talking about and they go away and talk about, and maybe they post something on social, or maybe they just have a one-to-one conversation. What is it you loved about that hotel? You often find that it's all those higher experiential things that aren't necessarily related to a general dining experience. They might be related to something they saw on a walk when they're out and about in the hotel, and then you get to a point where you realize you just need to encompass those things and really make use of what that beauty is in and around and what attractions there are, because it all boils down to that regional area and what you can offer. And it's a little bit, as the trends are coming in and the slow travel, it needs to be more of an immersive experience. And when that becomes an immersive experience, that has to bleed out into the local community. So anything that you can do in terms of partnership, and that's partnership marketing or teaming up with someone. It's as simple as some of the local produce, but it's also introducing them to local artisans and giving them suggestions of what they can do to really make them feel that they've had a different experience than they could normally probably get in a hotel, where they just go for that straightforward, I'm going to stay, I'm going to have dinner and maybe use the spa. We need to inspire them, to push them a bit further, to have an adventure with us.
I like that. Having an adventure with us. I think you can certainly sign me up on that. On that, whatever it is you're offering, I'm there.
I just had a couple of things to comment on, actually, based on what Tara and Laura said. And last year I probably travelled easily 60 nights away from home. It's a job, obviously, that requires travelling, so spending time in hotels is mainstay. Unfortunately, if you want to look at it that way. But when I stay in a hotel as an individual, I think the number one thing for me is to be made welcome. All right, obviously, if I do end up staying in the same hotel, people will get to know me. Obviously, the more people that are staying there, technology is needed, and we'll come on to that in terms of how we can relate back to previous stays and data of those stays. But definitely being made to feel welcome is really important, and just that welcome hello is important. Just going back to something that Laura said on technology in the room, one of which is quite funny. Having a TV that's easy to use is absolutely should be a no-brainer. I think they got too complicated in this day and age. And the other thing is lights. I stay in far too many hotels and I can never work out how to turn the lights off. Anyway, I'm sidetracking, but various stories from my stays abroad and in the UK.
I want to draw on the data side, and Matthew, I know you've just alluded to it. Laura, you're overseeing. You mentioned a quite a big, relatively big portfolio, 8 hotels, 5 in London, 3 in the US. Looking at the data point, collecting that data, harnessing the data. What challenges do hoteliers currently face in that process?
Probably too much data sometimes. I think one of the big things about hoteliers, and I think this is quite unique to us, is that we've got so many systems for so many things, but very few of them ever join up with each other. They might be brilliant for their particular thing that they do, but they don't work together, particularly historically. Over a number of years, you've got different systems of legacy systems that come in, and sometimes they might be the best thing for that particular, whether it's the restaurant, whether it's the spa, whether it's and for the individual who's wanting to use that particular space, it doesn't need to be an all singing or dancing thing that looks after the entire property, because a lot of our guests come to our hotels and don't know that we're a hotel. They think we're a bar, they think we're a restaurant, they think we're an event space, we're a spa. So they need that to be seamless for them. But if you're also then a hotel guest who wants to come in and use the entire space as one, like a resort, that also needs to work together. So I think that can be a difficult thing to achieve over. We've got different size properties and that have different parts of that. Some don't have restaurants at all. They're just townhouses. So the other thing is so much data, and is it relevant data? Is it something that's actually usable for you? Is it something that you can you break that down, and do you have the tools to be able to interpret the data in the way that it's useful? Because I think there's so many ways that you could receive that data now because of all of the systems. If I think of the many ways you could book a restaurant table with us now, how do I receive that data, and how good quality is it to then use that for something further down the line? Similarly with, the way you could book a hotel room, I may or may not have the information that I need to then be able to segment that. Even when a guest checks in, we take their passport. That's their nationality. That's not where they live. So if we're wanting to then use that for further things down the line, how useful is it that someone who lives in London but happens to have a Spanish passport, how useful is that information to me? I'm not sure, that because marketing to Spanish people is not gonna help me further down the line. So I think there's so much information, it's breaking it down and making it useful for the team. And we'll come on to it, I think, a bit later. That information that I do have, how do I translate that to the team in a way that they actually can then go out and create those brilliant experiences with guests, with the recognition and the information they know about that guest? How do we make sure that filters through the organization in a way that's useful, not overwhelming, and also relevant to what they are trying to deliver for the guest without getting in the way of their interactions with the guests? So I think, yeah, the biggest thing for me is the amount of data that we now all of a sudden have, and how good a quality is it?
I would absolutely agree with that, Laura. It's the amount of data, and actually, if you categorize it as what you would call contact data, and how useful is that contact data to market to someone if you don't actually know what they like and what they're interested in. So the key for us is collecting that really useful information, and retail do it brilliantly. You know, if you like this, you might like this, and that's where we need to be more retail, really, in that terms, and we need to understand what's meaningful to our guests. We're lucky, like Laura, we have repeat guests, and I think, to touch on something that was mentioned earlier, is that welcome, but it's actually familiarity, and do we know our guests well enough? And actually, when you look at, we've got some very long-standing members of the team, and that they know guests personally, they know their names. How do we use technology to enhance that? Because not everybody that comes into the team has worked for the company as long as we have. They don't know as many of those guests. How do we impart that information to make it feel familiar for a guest, and to get that great welcome, as you mentioned earlier?
This someone I was on hosted a panel discussion at the Independent Hotel Show. The focus of this discussion was all around F&B, and I remember asking an F&B director where the potential was for greater synergies with the hotel side of operations, and she mentioned, exactly to your point, is putting the two data sets together to produce the upselling and cross-selling opportunities, and having that seamless flow from your rooms to your dining, and your dining to your rooms. So I think I just wanted to add that there's definitely different ways that you can bring those data sets together. It's how. And speaking of how, Matthew, coming to you, my friend. How do you see the role of the PMS then evolving to help resolve some of these challenges?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a second. Just coming back to the retail comment, actually, that's a comment I think we've all used for years and years. And even 10 years ago, you think about the retail industry doing some really good and innovative stuff that's now transcending across, you know, web shops, from Amazon to whatever it might be. And we still talk about that gap. We still need to catch up with retail, you know, and you think, well, 10 years have gone by and hospitality is still trying to catch up with retail because retail is still ahead, and it's time to stop that and just really bring the two together. And, you know, I hope we see that happening ultimately, because we can't keep saying that retail's ahead of the game and hospitality's got to keep catching up, but just really coming to that point. But yeah, look, I mean, PMS, I guess, look, before I answer it, just two more points regarding the report. 64% of respondents said that staying in a hotel where wait times are reduced across all touch points would make them more likely to rebook. 6 in 10 of those people surveyed said that they were more likely to rebook at a venue that delivers experiences tailored to their individual preferences. And I think we've pretty much identified that over the last 20 minutes anyway. But I think, so far as PMS, I think, look, we've absolutely need to, and probably have, entered a new era, where I think simply describing it as a PMS system undermines what tasks it really must perform today. You know, we need to look beyond what PMS once was perhaps still is and what it must be right now. But going forward, it's got to be different. It's always been regarded as that heartbeat of the hotel. But I guess now the limbs, the legs and the arms need to form part of that same solution and ensure that we appeal to the current generation and the next generation, the future guests, the new demographic of guests. Why must we always model PMS on the principles of old and try and slot it into our future needs? It's time to definitely change. Look, the advent of the cloud, new technologies allows us to all challenge this status quo, and it's easier to talk about the ease of having multiple integrations. For example, someone touched on that earlier, with lots of integrations, lots of data, too much data, but it's really hard to achieve. And I think, Tara, you touched on the fact that you've got lots of data, but it's contact data. We still don't really know who the person is, and we've got to be a genius probably to work that out. So I guess what do I mean by that when I lead on from those integration discussions? We know that to meet these guest needs, we want a tailored experience. We've got to collect the data first, of course. We've got to crunch it and then make insightful decisions. Nothing new there really, but the challenge has been to ensure the integrity of that data. It has to be data that's clean and not polluted. Again, to the point there about too much data. There's too much data and we don't understand it, and it's all messy and it's not clean, and we've got to make sure that data's clean, and it's not clean because it's coming from so many disparate systems in slightly different ways, and all this causes a myriad of issues across the business. It's the reliability of getting that data, it's even the uptime of those interfaces, it's the costs of getting that data, not to mention any fallout between these different parties. And then there's the shortcomings at the pace at which both those companies develop their products. But all of these have an influence in terms of how we ultimately want to obtain data, crunch it and return insightful information. We can evolve PMS in an effective way to seamlessly and without fuss collect both pre-stay data and in-stay data that's clean and intuitive across all touch points. If we can do that, then we stand a pretty decent chance of understanding the habits, trends and behaviors of these guests, or our future guests, and their expectations. And I guess remembering that this future guest is already checking into our properties. They're already checking in now. They're there, they exist, but they just want something more from us. So if we can reduce the dependencies and provide those meaningful insights analysis, then we can make in-stay experience decisions and outside of stay decisions to incentivize that loyalty and drive rebookings. I mean, there's a fundamental difference between multiple systems all trying to work together and an ecosystem where that data sharing, and I think you touched on it, Eloise, is fluid and it is in an always-on state. And to be frank, this should be common practice now. We should be able to access data about whoever, whenever we want to. All right, that's simple. And from that, we can either make in the moment decisions, or again, more insightful marketing strategies post-stay. Just some thoughts really in terms of, I think the PMS of old is one aspect, and we need to move forward.
Mm-hmm. On the data point, I know I showed some slides earlier and I can't remember what event it was where this stat was shared, but it was something around 51% of travellers or guests would agree to share biometric data if they know that they are going to receive personalised, tailored experiences. And I thought that stat was really quite insightful, because I think a lot of people, we assume that guests might not be willing to give up certain data, but if you know that that reward is going to be high, and you can opt in and out, of course, then you'd argue why wouldn't you? Sticking with you, Matthew, quickly, how can hoteliers use data, or perhaps the gaps in the data, to help to understand and identify areas for improvement, or perhaps identify to yourself, as a technology provider, what solutions you can work on to help and support and bring everything closer together.
Are you talking particular metrics or just operational nuances or workflows?
Metrics, I would imagine. Especially if we're looking at the data sets that are on that platform, but they're coming from various different platforms. How is that informing?
Yeah. Okay.
Growth?
I mean, I think there's if you break that capability to drive certain metrics maybe into two or three categories. I think there's the metrics we're all familiar with, which we all need in our lives to run a hotel, and they may well be anything from the occupancy rates to RevPARs, average spends at F&B, what have you. They're all important and integral. I think those don't necessarily help the guest out. They help the business out understand errors in their ways, but they're not helping the guest. So I think, again, we probably need to be forward thinking and begin to leverage metrics or data that can be used in the moment. And I touched on that phrase a minute ago. And if we can use those in the moment metrics spanning all the touch points, so we don't have to pass data from one to another, but we exist within an ecosystem, and we enable those immediate decisions for the benefit of the guest, then I think we're probably going to make some good strides forward. And I guess if I give an example, obviously, allergen information is completely prevalent in today's world, and it always will be. But it's about ensuring that a matter such as allergen information is accessible at tableside in the restaurant, and it's viewable immediately by the F&B team. But it may have been entered into the PMS either days before I stayed, or it may have been entered into another system such as the PMS or an alternative product minutes before. But now I'm in the restaurant, and I need to have that information at my fingertips in a mobile environment at the table side. And allergens is just one information. It may well be that they're a returning guest, whether they're a resident of the hotel or whether they are someone that's walked off the street because they like the restaurant. We touched on that before. But I need to know immediately the likes and dislikes, and most importantly, the allergen information of that guest. But that information doesn't necessarily just stay in the F&B department. All right, it will transcend all components of that hotel ecosystem. And again, you want the chef to leverage these metrics so he prepares well for service. And I guess conversely, if you're in housekeeping, you want to have similar guest data immediately at your fingertips to help how we prepare the room and look after the guest. And I think the same goes for all departments, right? From whether you're in events or you're in the spa, or even if you're fortunate enough to have a golf course, if relevant, wherever I am entering data and wherever my path or flow as a guest through that particular hotel or resort plays out, I always want the next member of staff to know all about me. And all of this data then post-stay can be collected. All right, it's all there, and it's not dirty. It's not too much data. It's not just contact data, but it's there to really elevate that experience. And again, going back to some of my personal stays and obviously the 5-star market, people that are coming to stay in that luxury end have money. Ultimately, it's not all about discounting, and I know everyone appreciates that. But it's just getting the experience nailed on, and we've all stayed in environments where someone mentions something to us and it resonates with us and go, that's clever. Yeah, you knew that, and that will stick with me for a long time. So yeah, I mean, they're the sort of immediate things that come to mind in terms of how we can begin to use those in the moment metrics, those post-stay analytics and analysis of data, but in a more modern and meaningful and fluid way that I don't think exists at the moment from what I see.
Mm-hmm.
Just some thought.
Yeah, no, thank you. And speaking on the sort of post-stay, I want to sort of broaden that out, Tara. Your role is looking to attract and then engage with that customer pre, during, and post. So this also, to Matthew's point, brings in the role of teams and how important it is for teams and staff to be able to engage with their customers pre, during, post. So with that, Tara, how can property management systems, or if you want to use the umbrella term, technology, help to empower teams to engage across that whole customer journey?
I think it goes back to, we were talking about touch points earlier. There are some questions when you take, for example, if we start right from the beginning and a guest lands on a website and they want to make a booking, for example, they might have some really simple questions to ask, which forms their decision making as to whether they confirm or not. I think a couple of the really quick wins are, do you have car charging on site? That's becoming more and more popular, obviously. Can I get a late checkout? Can I get an early checkout? All those things, if you can alleviate that with a simple touch point, for example, a chat, and you can do that in a chat, you're actually giving your teams back some time to be able to do the really great proactive things. And I think that's an example when you're booking, rather than pick up the phone. And some guests, we need to address the fact that not every guest is the same. They all want to be individual, and they've got different ways of asking those questions. So that's how we want to alleviate, and we want to use that technology to alleviate that. I recently renewed my car insurance. I did it all through chats, and I was very happy to do it. I was a little bit nervous. I hadn't done it before, but I had a great experience. I've told quite a few people, and now I'm telling everybody on a webinar that I've done that. But it just proves that when it works, it really does work. And when it suits you, you want to talk about it and tell other people about it. And that's the best marketing that we can have. When they're arriving in the hotel, that's again, we should be using that technology really to just elevate that service. Any information that we have that we can leverage about the guests to make them feel more welcome, to make them feel familiar, to put their favorite drink in their room, to put a flower that they absolutely love. They can be quite simple operational things, but they're incredibly effective in terms of that memory part of your stay. And actually, when it all boils down, and if I said to everybody out there on the webinar, what is the best stay that you've ever had? What's your most favorite stay? It's going to revolve around a memory. It's not going to be a physical thing. It's not going to be they had a great pool, the hotel room was fantastic. It's going to be a real classic touch point memory. And I think that's what we need to allow technology to help us with. And the point that you mentioned about the communication in the teams, I mean, Laura, I feel your pain. We have many different platforms that we work on. If we could just have one platform that we communicate, I mean, I think everybody probably on the call, there's a morning meeting, but again, you can't grab everybody in that morning meeting. But if there's a point of technology that allows everybody to pass it around from department to department, it becomes really impressive to a guest. That before they've even arrived in that department, we already know about them. And that would be a great place to be in our hospitality industry right now, I think.
Yeah. Well said.
Let's bring operations into the fold here. Let's bring Laura back in. I mean, it's one thing to market to your guest and attract them and make sure that they're, once they're on property, I suppose that's when you're handed over to the head of operations or general manager. But there is so much training. We saw earlier the headline that even educational university programs are now mimicking AI scenarios so that staff members can get that hands-on learning. So what essential skills do you think are going to be crucial for hotel staff when delivering that fantastic service?
Well, for me, a lot of it is taking their time away from doing and spending a lot of time and learning systems to have things that are very intuitive that actually frees them up to spend the time. You're there because you want to have the hospitality and you want to be, we employ great people and we want them to show themselves, not to be bogged down by technology, and we need things to be very intuitive. We need things to be relevant to them. Most of our teams do not sit in front of a computer. They are, it's very difficult to get the housekeeping team, to get them involved in that code, because that's not what they do. We've got a lot of new staff who come in, and they're, I think, younger team members. They've grown up with technology. They're used to using it. They're used to having it as part of their kind of day-to-day. But then we've got other team members who that absolutely is not where they're used to. And in hospitality, you don't necessarily ever needed to really have that as a so it's integrating that so it is intuitive and it helps them get the information that they need and be able to use that information in the right way without actually putting a barrier up between them and the guest. Because I think that's when, I think a lot of it is knowing your own guest. I think our guests wouldn't want to have that personal interaction taken away, and like having the chat to answer questions. They want to speak to a person, and that's always how it's going to be. But there are going to be some people who do want to have that ease of not having to speak to anyone, to be able to do everything online, to be able to have a keyless check-in that I just send you the details and you can come in and you can use the key on your phone to be able to enter, and you don't need to speak to a person. I think that's definitely, and it's finding the right balance and being able to free up the time of the team to be able to deliver the service to those guests without having having the information at their fingertips, which is quite difficult from all of those different systems, to be able to then go on and deliver those experiences and those personal moments to the guest, and be able to do that without having the kind of the barriers of the technology there.
Mm-hmm. I'm certainly seeing or reading more about attracting an older workforce. I feel like I'm having to choose the right words here, but there is an influx of older, people coming back into the industry, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. How do you ensure that everybody it's accessible? All of this has to be accessible. Hospitality is about being inclusive and accessible, and this definitely means for your staff as well. Staying with you, Laura, how can hotels measure the effectiveness of such things as staff training and making sure that their tech stacks are up to a certain standard on the loyalty side, on guest retention, and that repeat guest?
I think it's measuring things like talking to the team. They are going to tell you whether they think that the technology they've got is working for them or it really isn't, and it is impacting what, because I will be told if there is something that is making their life an awful lot harder, and they will be able to tell me their ideas, and listening to them. They're the ones that are on the floor using using this technology, and if they are finding that this is a challenge and they just won't use it. I remember we tried at one point with handheld micros terminals, and I got turned, absolutely not. A notepad is absolutely fine. I do not need this. I'm not walking around with this. So I think it's listening to the team and understanding. I think you can tell from reviews and sentiment and what guests are saying, whether they're finding this is actually a bit of a challenge. Are you seeing the technology that you've got and that is actually adding to the experience or taking away from it? Because I think you can see whether, as I said, I think it needs to be seamless. And if you are seeing that people are dropping off, or they're not booking, or they're not completing things, because you can definitely look at their journey and see whether or not there is something that is stopping them, or at some point are we not giving the right information? Are we making this too difficult? And what are we getting asked? What questions do we get asked on a regular basis that could we deal with that in a different way? So I think, guest satisfaction, we know our guests. Talking to them, is there something, because again, guests will also tell you if there's something that absolutely does not work for them, like I don't need a fancy light switch, give me a light switch, it works perfectly well, thank you very much, please do not put it on an iPad. Because they have to have, kind of a 10-page manual on how to turn the lights on and off. So I think that you have got those guests that will tell you those things, and they will come back to you. And I think you can tell if you have got those repeat guests, you probably you're doing something right. But I think it's using the data that you get from those and measuring that in the KPIs as to whether it's working, but also listening to your guests and your team, because they're the best people to tell you that whether something's hitting the nail or not.
Thank you. I want to give the final question to Matthew, but before I do, it's coming your way, and I want you to talk to us about the return on experience. Before we do that, Tara, final question before we head over to Matthew. Looking at revenue generating opportunities, I mentioned earlier about the upselling and cross-selling and how tech can support that. How can hoteliers better use technology to increase those cash flows, those revenue streams, and therefore improve the return on investment?
Yeah, I think in that sense, I would go back to that the resort feel and that resort mentality. So there's various touch points within our hotels, for example, and we want people to come and stay with us. We want them to dine, and we then want them to move on to spa or maybe activities, have a game of golf. And it's how we use those as really nice prompts in terms of what we know their key interests are to inspire them when they arrive. We talked about the adventure earlier. What's going to be your adventure while you're staying with us? What do you want to try? Is there something new? How can we use that technology just to keep all those touch points going and to move our guests around in the right manner, but also use that very personalized experience with the people in front of them, with our teams. And then I think moving on from that, it's that revenue that we can drive, and we talk about that repeat, and we've talked about that a few times today. And one of the areas that sort of untapped, as it were, in the smaller boutique arena now is probably the loyalty and the loyalty schemes that you can drive. We're in very early stages of our loyalty scheme, but it's really been working. And the idea of being able to get some meaningful data, we actually really do from that loyalty program. We can see exactly where people are enjoying spending, how they're moving between the hotels, what they're spending on, and what their patterns are of when they come and stay to us. And it also provides another platform to be able to talk to them on a more of an experiential level and in a personal level as well. So I would say for us personally, as Eden Hotel Collection, at the moment in 2024, what we're looking to do is to drive that loyalty program further, because we can see where the opportunity is on that, and we can see where the opportunity is for the guests to enjoy that with us.
Thank you. And Matthew, final word here. I introduced Agilysys as being a solution to help maximize the return on experience. And as a lot of today's conversation has revolved around experience, both from the staff side and the guest side, could you maybe summarize some final words as to how do you measure that return on experience? How do you maximize it? And what can we walk away with today? Maybe some actionable advice, a key learning.
But I think return on experience is a great phrase, and it really comprises the end result of all the hard effort that's put in to both ensuring that guest remains happy, content, satisfied, and it also references, we've said, the employee, and we have to ensure that we drive efficiencies in a very subtle manner to ensure that we bridge that gap between all demographics of guests, from those that want their orders written on a notepad to those that want to talk rather than text, and as a result of that, by doing it in a consistent manner across all touch points, ensures that the staff remain content, they remain at a level that allows them to enjoy their role, and in turn the guest also enjoys their stay. But ultimately, return experience is that end result of that hard effort, that ability to truly understand what it is about our guests that makes them happy, and how we engage with those guests, that ensures that they will return back to that property, that hotel, that resort, and those staff will also remain. It's been talked about for too many times that the challenges in recent years around staff retention, as well as historically, it's never been a fantastic vertical to retain staff. So we've just got to look after the staff. If we look after the staff well, we look after our guests well, and if we look after our guests well, they're going to be returning, and that's what return experience is all about.
Fantastic. What a great note to end on. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Laura. I have some closing slides to briefly run through before we really tie up our conversation today, but a gentle reminder to our audience members, this webinar will stay open right at the end for an extra 2 minutes if you would like to follow up on any of the links that we have popped into the chat today. For those who might be unaware, we have the upcoming Serviced Apartment Awards taking place on the 24th of May at Leonardo Hotel, London Tower Bridge. Now, these awards are open to the global serviced apartment, apart hotel and extended stay hotel sector. There are 19 award categories up for grabs, and you can enter as many as you like. The deadline for entries is the 22nd of March, so less than a month away, and I'd actively encourage anyone, even our hotelier audience, that has serviced apartments in their portfolio to enter. We welcome everybody. Once again, we are inclusive and just as accessible. So the links to find out more details have been popped into the chat. And if you're interested in working with us across our digital and in-person events, please do get in touch with my colleagues, Rav or Piers. Their details are on your screen and have also been popped into the chat. And all that's left for me to do today is to say thank you. Thank you to Agilysys for helping to create the content. Thank you to Matthew, Tara and Laura for sharing their insights. I will be back very shortly, in about 2 weeks' time for the next webinar. But otherwise, take care of yourselves. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, we are International Hospitality Media, or IHM for short. IHM is the #1 brand to engage with decision makers in hospitality and real estate. Our 4 multimedia brands lead their respective sectors with breaking news, comments, trends and opinion across a variety of multimedia solutions. We provide an inspirational community to connect people through world-class events, webinars, podcasts, award schemes and much more. But let us share our story of who we are and what we do. Over 10 years ago, Piers and George had a light bulb moment to provide expert opinion, comments and low-cost digital content. And so they went on a journey over the past decade, creating media platforms to serve the hospitality and real estate industries. We now have an engaged audience with a reach of over 60,000 monthly visitors across our website, 48,000 of our email database across all the sectors, and over 67,000 across our social channels. Everything we do believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. We make things simple and very easy to work with us. And we're a friendly bunch too. We offer creative solutions to help you achieve your business goals. Read, watch, listen, meet with IHM. Contact us for a chat today. Just look at some of the brands we have worked with recently.